Well, welcome everybody, and it's great to have you all on here. And we've got an exceptionally good webinar for you today on this, the International Day of Human Rights, and an appropriate one to be doing something in an area which needs a lot of work, and a lot of work is being done. So we want to first of all recognise the Indigenous people of the lands wherever you are, and give respect to the elders past, present and emerging as well.
So my name is Carolyn Kitto. I'm National Co-Director of Be Slavery Free, and with Fuzz, who is next to me. So this webinar is entitled Cotton is Soft, Forced Labour is Not. And this is an issue that Be Slavery Free and Stop the Traffic have been working on for a number of years. The issue of forced labour, which happens unfortunately in too many parts of the world, but we brought a particular profile to Uzbekistan and Turkmenistan. So I want to start by introducing two people who have been key activists, know exactly what's happening on the ground in this area. And they are Ruslan Miyativ, who is a Turkmenistan person currently exiled in the Netherlands. And he will talk about his experience. It's something like 3 o'clock in the morning where he is. So he's done a pre-record for us, but it's very engaging. So we hope you look forward to it. And after him, Allison Gill, who is the coordinator and leader of the Cotton Campaign, which has done such brilliant work in bringing our attention to all of this. So please, we're joined first of all by Ruslan.
Hello, my name is Ruslan Miyativ. I'm a citizen of Turkmenistan, a journalist and a human rights defender. I currently live in the Netherlands, and I'm the head of Turkmen.news. It's one of the handful independent media and human rights initiatives focused solely on Turkmenistan. We bring news from the country that is often compared to North Korea in terms of the amount of rights and freedoms granted for citizens, a country that tolerates no freedom of information or freedom of speech, and where civil society activists must work undercover in order not to be revealed and punished for the work that they do. We work since 2010, and since 2013, we monitor the use of forced labor in Turkmenistan during the cotton picking season. Every fall, tens of thousands of civil servants, and by that I mean school teachers, hospital doctors, state bank employees, and we have only state banks in Turkmenistan, employees of different factories, the post service, other departments, utilities, telecom, etc. All of these workers every fall are forced to pick cotton. Turkmenistan is one of the world's largest cotton producers. In Central Asia, it's only two countries, Uzbekistan and Turkmenistan. We export cotton all over the world until 2018, even to the United States of America. But in 2018, thanks to our continuous reporting, thanks to lots of advocacy work, we filed a petition to the US Customs and Border Protection Agency and asked them to take action against Turkmen textiles and cotton, because all of it is produced with the use of forced labor. In Turkmenistan, farmers don't own the land. They can only lease it from the state, and they have no choice regarding what to grow on those lands. They are basically given choice between wheat and cotton, and there is a cotton plan, a quota imposed by the state to every farmer. If a farmer fails to collect that amount, the amount that was set by the state, his leased land is taken away and given to somebody else. This problem is not new in Turkmenistan. It is coming, the roots are from the Soviet era. In the Soviet times, Uzbekistan and Turkmenistan were two of very few countries that produced cotton. And the practice, the system is the same, just like in the Soviet times, where also public sector workers were forced to pick cotton. We monitor, as I said, since 2013 on a yearly basis. Every year, a small team of our trained monitors works in different parts of Turkmenistan. They visit villages, they visit farms, they talk to civil servants, they often talk to children that are also forced to pick cotton, usually alongside their parents. It's not like a common practice anymore in Turkmenistan, but for example, when I was a school student, we were sent to pick cotton in an organized manner. This practice is not in place anymore. However, children do appear on cotton fields. They either help their families or replace somebody, because that choice is also given to civil servants in Turkmenistan. If you don't want to pick yourself, for example, if you're, let's say, a school teacher and you're physically not fit to pick yourself, then you can pay somebody else who will replace you in the cotton field. This practice is very commonly used in Turkmenistan. It leads to massive corruption. For example, school administration can tell that, okay, we have an order from the Department of Education to send 50 teachers to cotton field. And if somebody doesn't want to pick, they can pay the supervisor, the school principal, so that he can hire replacement workers. So he collects money from, let's say, 50 teachers, but in reality, the teachers don't know how many people were hired in the end, and if they were hired at all, and how this money is spent, and why they collect certain amount. At the moment, it is 30 manats. Manat is a Turkmen currency, which is equal to $1. So $1 a week they need to pay for replacement workers, and of course this amount may seem not significant, but let's keep in mind that an average salary in Turkmenistan is $45 to $60 per month. So paying $1 per week is a significant amount for many people who have jobs in Turkmenistan, and which is rare in itself, because we have a huge unemployment rate, and that is actually one of the reasons why the public is not complaining about the forced labor practice, because if you complain, if you start to demand your rights, your labor rights, you will simply be sacked, you will be fired from your job with a negative reference letter, so that in the future you won't be able to find any job, even if you're a super pooper specialist in your field. That negative reference would basically ruin your entire career. So many people prefer to pay that money for their supervisors to find a replacement worker. Some pick themselves, of course, some travel to the cotton fields, which is rare actually, because, for example, in the education sector or in the healthcare sector, that choice is not given anymore. You need to pay money and remain at your work, so that the supervisors can hire somebody else, and at the same time you're performing your duties basically as a doctor or as a teacher. We have, this is not a fairy tale or something. We base our information, when we speak with reporters, we base our information on evidence. We have collected in all of these years of monitoring, we have collected, I don't know, gigabytes of photographs, video recordings, audio recordings. For example, when education department officials hold meetings with school teachers and school directors and tell them that, okay, look, we received an order from the governor, from this region's governor, and the order is that every school sends a certain number of teachers, staff to the cotton fields, and that we need to meet this quota, otherwise there will be some punishment if we don't. Yeah, so we have evidence. It's evidence-based information. Often we publish it. Sometimes we don't for security reason, just for the sake of safety of our reporters and monitors in Turkmenistan. But the stakeholders for which we do this work, basically, decision makers abroad, foreign governments, and larger international human rights organizations, we fill them in about this evidence. We show them this evidence, and based on this information that we provide, for example, the US State Department's Trafficking in Persons report dedicated to Turkmenistan, that chapter dedicated to Turkmenistan, quite in detail tells about the forced labor system during the cotton picking, and this information comes from us. We are the only organization at the moment that monitors this on a continuous basis and with provision of sufficient evidence. Thanks to our work and the great advocacy work of our colleagues and partners in the cotton campaign, we managed to get some 100 brands, world brands, publicly sign a cotton pledge, Turkmen cotton pledge, in which they say that they are not going to knowingly source cotton or textiles from Turkmenistan because of the forced labor issue. Among those companies, brands that signed this pledge, there are world giants like Adidas, Nike, Inditex Group, etc. They are all aware of the problem. A few years ago, we got IKEA also signed, because IKEA was working with Turkmenistan and selling basically the bed sheets and pillowcases that were made in Turkmenistan. After a series of meetings with them, they finally said that they would stop working with the country. Because even their program of supporting local farmers and making sure that everything is done in a due diligence form is not working actually in Turkmenistan, because as I said in the very beginning, this country has absolutely no civil society in our Western understanding of this term, civil society. Yeah, we have a bunch of gongos that receive funding from the government, and they pretend to be independent organizations while they are not, of course. Similarly, we don't have independent press. We don't have any group that can touch upon any sensitive topic in Turkmenistan, be that forced labor, be that domestic violence or situation in Turkmen prisons, etc., etc. Such groups don't exist, and individuals who work on such themes, on such topics, they do it from the outside Turkmenistan. There was in the assignment for me for this presentation, for this webinar, was to say something positive. It's really hard to say something positive about the country that is often compared to North Korea, actually. Well, one thing I can say that even though Turkmenistan, the government pretends not to listen to us, to the civil society that continuously tells about the forced labor problem, they do read our reports, and it seems that they want to do something to change, to reform the situation. Last year, I believe, or 2 years ago, they slightly increased the purchasing prices of cotton. For example, the increase was very insignificant, but like something about a few dollars. But of course, for farmers, it was a positive, a good sign, good news, basically, as their incomes are very, very limited. The biggest problem in Turkmenistan is the way the entire industry works. It is entirely controlled and managed by the state. As I said, the state owns the land, the state provides the farmers all the fertilizers, chemicals, water, all of the machinery like tractors to plow the land, etc. And it's a given that farmers must comply and submit the amount of cotton that is required by the state. If they don't, they have to fill that amount which they could not collect. For example, if a farmer is given 2 tons per hectare, and if he collected only 1.5 ton, so 500 kilograms he needs to cover on his own. It means that he owns. It means that he owes the state that amount. So he has to sell his vehicles, he has to sell his cattle, but pay back the government for the cotton that he failed to produce. Of course, he sees no income from it. He sees only losses. And in the past few years, we have seen a number of Turkmen farmers giving up their lease land. For them, it's more beneficial if they simply immigrate to Turkey or to Russia and work there as anybody, you know, like a street sweeper, street cleaner, or whoever, and that would bring him more money, more income than cotton production in Turkmenistan. This is about 15 minutes that I'm speaking now, and one of the things in the assignment was to say what's next. Well, we do this work for 7 years in a row already, and frankly, we see no positive change. It's a good sign that certain governments ban Turkmen cotton. It's a good sign that brands say, okay, we are staying away from Turkmen cotton because of that problem. But it seems it's not enough. Turkmenistan is trading with countries that care little about human rights and labor rights of people. These countries are Turkey, for example, Bangladesh, Pakistan, China, sometimes India. We managed with partners, with colleagues, we identified several key and large buyers of Turkmen raw cotton in India and Pakistan. Then this cotton becomes yarn and then turns into a textile piece. And then this piece is sold then to countries like the United States, European Union's space, and perhaps even Australia. One particular textile mill we found in Pakistan that works with a cotton mill in India that purchases significant amount of Turkmen cotton, and then this end user, the Pakistani textile mill, then sells these products to the United States, despite the ban, the American ban on Turkmen cotton or textiles. Of course, this textile mill in Pakistan, they buy from all over the world, not only from Turkmenistan. Perhaps this cotton then gets mixed, and but even small part of Turkmen cotton in a pair of jeans is a ban in the United States, for example. We are trying to investigate such cases and provide a clear image, clear picture of how the system looks. But please be aware that even if a piece of clothes says that it's produced in Pakistan or in India, it doesn't mean that it doesn't contain Turkmen cotton. Pressure on the government is important. It is important to tell them that the international community is aware of the situation, of the problem, and that they need to change, because they're losing a lot from potentially rich markets. They're not selling in the United States anymore, which theoretically could mean a loss of millions of USDs. And if they change, if they reform, they will benefit financially, economically, of course, and make their own farmers, more rich and better off. Also, it's important for foreign governments to tell the Turkmen government that they need to change this practice. They need to stop this practice, that they need true reforms in order to be successful and simply respect human rights. It's a basic human right. This is about it that I wanted to tell you in the 15 minutes that were given to me. If you have any questions, please feel free to email me at editor@Turkmen.news. I repeat, editor@Turkmen.news. I'll happily answer all of your questions. Thanks again. My name was Ruslan Miyativ, editor of Turkmen.news. Bye-bye.
Well, what an amazing piece of input from Ruslan. Thank you so much. And this is an area that we're going to work on further in Australia. We managed to get all of the 200 top companies on the Australian Stock Exchange who used cotton in their supply chain to sign the Uzbekistan cotton pledge. And we will work next year on getting those same companies to also sign the Turkmenistan pledge. There are already some on the list. So Design Works, the Country Road David Jones Group, and the Just Group, but we need to go a lot further. So next I want to introduce, and we're sorry that you ended up in presenter mode. We're not quite sure what that happened, but we think we can get you out of it for the next one. And I want to introduce Allison Gill, who's from the Cotton Campaign. They partner with Ruslan and other very local people. They respond to what is going on the ground. And so welcome, Allison, and we look forward to hearing from you now.
Hello, I'm Allison Gill, Forced Labor Program Director at Global Labor Justice International Labor Rights Forum and coordinator of the Cotton Campaign. The Cotton Campaign is a multi-stakeholder coalition of NGOs, responsible investors, independent labor unions, faith groups, and business associations working to end forced labor in Central Asia, specifically Uzbekistan and Turkmenistan. The Cotton Campaign and GLJ-ILRF are also members of the Coalition to End Forced Labor in the Uyghur region. I'm going to give you a quick update on developments in Uzbekistan, including our work to develop a responsible sourcing model there, as well as ongoing forced labor in Turkmenistan and what companies can do to push for change and ensure they are not using forced labor in their supply chains. As part of our work, the Cotton Campaign is the steward of company pledges not to use or source cotton products from Uzbekistan or Turkmenistan until state-sponsored forced labor in those countries has ended. Some of you may be pledge signatories. If you are, thank you for that. The company pledges have been an important tool to pressure governments of those countries to make change. Over the 12 years since we've been working on forced labor in Central Asia, a lot has changed, specifically in Uzbekistan. Just a few years ago, Uzbekistan had the largest state-sponsored forced labor system in the world, with over 1 million people each year forced to pick cotton. Since the new president came to power in 2017, the country has embarked on an ambitious reform program to modernize the economy and eliminate forced labor. This work is well underway, and the government's political commitment to end forced labor is genuine. But change takes time. Since the 2019 harvest, the ILO has reported that more than 100,000 people worked in forced labor conditions. Independent monitoring by our partner, the Uzbek Forum for Human Rights, documented the continued forced mobilization of civil servants, bank employees, law enforcement, and military recruits to pick cotton. Uzbekistan has yet to develop independent, fair, and effective recruitment systems, so although cotton production is now mostly privatized there, some farmers and cotton producers continue to rely on the same government-controlled mechanisms as in previous years, which often use coercion to recruit labor. The 2020 harvest, which is just completed, shows further improvement, which is very promising. Enforcement mechanisms have grown stronger, and independent monitors for the first time have found that some cotton clusters were able to pick the crop without forced labor. There were still some problems in the country with forced labor and government mobilization of labor, and we'll be able to release more comprehensive findings in the coming weeks. But the situation is hopeful, and seeking to recognize the important progress made in Uzbekistan and responding to concerns from the global business community about the need for assurances that there is no forced labor in their cotton supply chains, the Cotton Campaign has been working to develop a model that would allow producers in Uzbekistan who are not using forced labor to access international markets. Building on international best practices, we're proposing an enforceable and transparent sourcing model that is equipped with a worker-driven grievance and remediation mechanism, a multi-stakeholder co-governed board, and an independent monitoring body. Since there is currently no field-level monitoring or other system in place to ensure that cotton is harvested in Uzbekistan free of forced labor, currently there's no way for brands or buyers to have the assurances that Uzbek cotton is not tainted with forced labor. So we have developed the responsible sourcing approach to allow a way for producers who are not using forced labor to gain access to buyers, to develop and consolidate best practices, and to guarantee workers on those farms while providing global brands with confidence that they're compliant with international commitments. We're inviting global brands and buyers interested in looking at Uzbekistan as a potential source for cotton products and who are interested in being leaders in responsible business practices to work with us to implement the responsible sourcing approach. And I'd be happy to respond to any questions about it during our Q&A section of the webinar. Turning briefly to Turkmenistan, there the situation has changed much less. The government continues to mobilize thousands of workers to the cotton fields every year to pick cotton during the harvest or to extort payment from civil servants and other workers to pay for replacement pickers. Turkmenistan is one of the most closed and repressive regimes in the world, characterized by isolated, authoritarian, one-person rule. Every year, workers from the public and private sectors are forced to fulfill cotton quotas, with doctors, dentists, teachers, students, and military personnel among those obliged to leave their normal work posts to go and pick cotton. Ruslan will speak in more detail about the system in Turkmenistan and findings from independent monitoring this year. 101 companies have now pledged not to source cotton from Turkmenistan. But just as with the Uyghur region, which you may know about, there is an extremely high risk that consumers around the world are buying products made with Turkmen cotton. Research conducted by our Cotton Campaign partner, Anti-Slavery International, for example, has shown that Turkey imports a significant volume of cotton-based goods from Turkmenistan. China is also a known destination for Turkmen cotton and textile products. Both Turkey and China are key export markets to the global fashion industry. This points to the urgent need for companies to take steps to know where their cotton, yarn, and fabric comes from. Otherwise, they're at the risk of profiting from the Turkmen government's oppressive regime. So we are asking apparel brands and companies that use cotton to focus resources into mapping and disclosing their supply chains that would provide confidence to consumers on where the cotton, yarn, and fabric in our clothing and home furnishings comes from. Importantly, governments must introduce laws that make companies legally responsible to take action to prevent the use of forced labor in their supply chains, and which ban the import of goods produced from contexts with state-imposed forced labor. If designed effectively, we believe that mandating transparency and traceability in supply chains as part of a company's human rights due diligence process, these laws will go a long way to prevent companies from hiding their potential profiteering from state-imposed forced labor through opaque supply chains. Then consumers will have the confidence that their purchases don't send profits to those who prosper from human rights abuses in the cotton fields of Turkmenistan. Again, I'd be happy to answer questions about any of this work, and grateful to have the opportunity to talk to you. Thanks.
And a huge thank you to Allison for that really helpful update on where we're at. Our next presenter is a good friend of ours, and the organisation that she works for, Elevate, is a good friend of Be Slavery Free. So Mabel Wong is the Australian-based Elevate staff person, and they work on social compliance. How can we work on identifying the risks that are associated with Uyghur forced labour in China? They do considerable work in China. That she won't just be focusing on fashion, but she'll be focusing on some of the very grassroots work that they have been engaging to assist businesses and companies and consumers in being sure that the cotton products that they buy are not made from, all the products they buy are not made from forced labour, Uyghur forced labour. So over to Mabel.
Thank you so much, Carolyn and Faz. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm clearly the only one who's sharing live, but I'm assuming it's going to be working. Let me try this. Can you see my slides?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, great. I'm just going to put it into full screen. Okay, thank you so much, Carolyn and Faz, for inviting myself to be a part of this. As Carolyn and Faz said, long-term partners. Typically, we would at least do a couple of physical events. In Australia, certainly we did that in the lead up to the modern slavery statement, plus, a range of other areas really trying to engage with business around this issue. So glad at least to be able to contribute to your final webinar session, if not an in-person one till next year. As Carolyn introduced, I'm Mabel from Elevate. I'm a senior director responsible for our sustainability consulting for the Asia Pacific region and based in Sydney. And again, I guess as Carolyn was also sharing, for us, we really engage the full spectrum on supply chain. We are a global solutions provider for sustainability and supply chain. And that means that, we engage really across the levels from brands, retailers, factories, sites, farms, and including, very importantly, the worker level through our intensive worker engagement work. So I'm really glad, actually, in terms of the sequencing for today, had Cotton Campaign share first. I think for us at Elevate certainly reminds us why we do this, the importance of the worker, and then also really our role in terms of engaging brands and retailers in this space. So our work really cuts across 4 areas. I'm in the consulting division. We have analytics programs. And again, as Carolyn has mentioned, we've got a strong assessment social compliance team. I mentioned those 4 portfolios of work for Elevate because really as a consultant here, I'm not able to do that unless I really have insights from my colleagues with boots on the ground to let us know, what's happening pertaining to respective social compliance issues that they're seeing. We do about 16,000 social compliance audits globally, and really from that data sets that we get, it really informs us to be able to work closely. So really today's discussion and presentation from my end is to first part show some of the trends that we're seeing on the ground and how certainly that has impacted, influenced issues linked to forced labor. Obviously, cotton has had a massive spotlight. But really for us, as we work across sectors, products, etc., the issue of forced labor really cuts across much more than the product we're discussing. I'll share some of that and the insights that we're learning. And then also at the second part, really just sharing how we're engaging with brands and retailers and also factories and sites in terms of, I guess, some of the solutions we're collaborating together on. So 2020 hasn't just been about COVID. Obviously, that has had massive supply chain disruption, but really we see continued trade wars, and that has, impact in terms of looking at alternative sourcing markets. Obviously, with COVID, we've also seen a huge shift, everything online. That's had a change also in consumer habits. Certainly, we see as well in terms of AI, a bigger discussion, not just the positives, but also asking questions, where does AI and the ethics of AI, right, in development agenda. We all know this, and we see this, in my mind, really positively in Australia, strong investor engagement, asking tougher questions, and not just asking for all ESG metrics, but asking, how is the effectiveness, right? And what are you doing beyond corporate to be having, positive impact in your supply chain? And we continue to see that in our mindsets really positive. Obviously, also there is a growing expectation on business to be disclosing more, but also be disclosing, in terms of its impact as well. So in the context, I guess, of 2020 and the pandemic that we're going through, just also shedding light on, what have been some of the other things as well. And within this context, how brands, retailers have to respond. I shared earlier in terms of, that we do significant amount of audits, but how this, I guess, relates to the work that we do and working closely with our clients. Is that obviously with each audit that we conduct, there are about over 600 data points specific to the conversation we have on forced labor. What are we tracking and looking at? And you can see some of the shaded gray areas, where obviously tracking in terms of non-compliances that we see on child labor, forced labor. What do we mean by that? We're also looking at areas like is there retention of passports, payment of recruitment fees? Do we see that as my colleagues are on the ground, doing the audits? And that really gives us, not just what we hear and see on the news, but, actually what is happening on the ground. And that really guides us in terms of our conversations as to what their risks exposure is. And from that also, we've been tracking obviously and pulling the news and web posts. And we did that quite early on with the pandemic, and really saw a huge risks in relation to workers' livelihoods, or the impact from job loss, as well as other areas that we look at when we're talking about forced labor, such as working hours, underpayment of wages, etc. Seeing a significant, I guess, violation in Q1 of this year compared to what we were tracking last year. The other piece, which I've mentioned a little bit, and I think was also mentioned in the first speaker, where certainly, I guess, in Q1, where COVID did impact China, but even before, we are seeing clients explore, where they could be sourcing from beyond China. And those definitely are some also of the clients that we work here in Australia. I think Turkey was also mentioned earlier. And I think what we are saying, I guess, and working alongside our clients is to say that if they do explore and look at alternative sourcing markets, that they also go in with their eyes open, that there are increased risks in these countries where, regulations, etc., might not be as strict as other places, and to be obviously aware of those. And you would see some markets where traditionally known for having significant number of overseas migrant workers, and that brings a level of risk pertaining to some of the forced labor indicators that we were talking about. What else? It was mentioned as well in terms of Uyghur workers. Again, this is not a 2020 news. I mean, it came out in Four Corners, right, last year. And also certainly a lot of those whom we work with were aware. But obviously with the ASPI report, it's really put in a spotlight. I just want to say as well, certainly in our engagement with corporate, it hasn't just been the apparel and garment industry that's looking at this issue. You know, cotton and the strand of cotton from that Xinjiang region is more than just the apparel. Is actually in other types of products as well, and therefore we see other industries also coming to us to ask us, you know, obviously about this issue. Obviously, this has got commercial implications with the US withhold release orders. I want to go a little bit to the picture on the right, and that's why I guess I shared at the early part of my presentation to say that, you know, I guess clearly cotton and that issue significantly important. But I think, you know, through COVID and what we saw the issue, for example, in Singapore, and really shining a spotlight in terms of worker treatment, you know, underpayment of wages, etc. Issues when we saw that in terms of the construction workers in Singapore. And so really that this forced labor allegation really spreading to more countries and industries. We engage with property and construction sector. And guess what? They say that their investors are now asking them, and they haven't before, about debt bondage. So really kind of, if there is one silver lining, I guess, on COVID, that, you know, it has shined a spotlight on other industries and really calling brands, retailers, etc., to be responsible as well as disclosing and understanding their risks. I don't think I need to dwell too much on this particular slide. We are probably all here really familiar with the Australian Modern Slavery Act and how much that has, you know, put in terms of brand disclosure on their supply chain and forced labor risks, as well as the China withhold release orders. And so the slides that I showed earlier really is the context of which the brands and the retailers across different industries and sectors have had to deal with this year, and have had to ask and be, or rather to respond to more questions by their customers, investors, senior management, board, etc., around what they're doing. Clearly what we're talking about today, that tier 2 and beyond, again, not new, we all know that, but the issue of cotton Uyghur workers, and even the situation obviously in Turkmenistan, you know, we are certainly seeing more brands asking, you know, what do we do about tier 2? Especially when obviously it's got commercial implications with regards to the withhold release orders. And we knew that you get more visibility from tier 1 at manufacturing and retail level. But when you go further down the chain, you know, the visibility isn't there. But at least we are certainly encouraged that more companies are asking and working with us to try to develop and conduct the traceability process to be better understanding their risks. I will end with this particular slide. I've been asked to talk about how we've been working with companies around forced labor risk assessment. There isn't a one approach. It's not a one size fits all. Again, this is not new to Elevate. Prior to, I guess, the situation that we hear around Uyghur workers, etc., we have, as part, or rather annexed to our Elevate social compliance audit for countries where we knew there were high risks in relation to overseas migrant workers, such as Malaysia, Thailand, Taiwan. You know, we have an additional foreign migrant worker protocol to be able to look more deeply into those issues. I think most of you know, Elevate has a strong worker engagement component, and we've always emphasized the importance of worker voice and worker insights, and have had specific forced labor related anonymous worker surveys to better understand those insights. Again, for us as well, it's also not just about, you know, finding out, but really building the capacity of brands, retailers, sites, their suppliers, you know, to understand and to be able to identify themselves. And so we've got a series of e-learning as well as in multiple languages. I brought out a specific partnership amongst the various that we have. We are partnering with Global Fund to End Modern Slavery on unauthorized subcontracting and forced labor in apparel supply chains in India. I guess I bring out all of this to say that there really isn't one, one needs to be working really at multiple levels. Obviously, the way we work with brands versus important partners like Be Slavery Free is different, and recognizing, this is an ecosystem and that we need to be putting out different ways. For us this year, with the spotlight obviously on Uyghur workers, we have been working much more closely with brands and retailers around worker origin, traceability, and forced labor. What that looks like is a more tailored FAQs, which have a mix of direct, indirect questions, looking at factory demographics, worker vulnerability, etc. And also, I would say in partnership, because this piece is new for us, but really in partnership with brands who really are wanting to do the right thing, working alongside ourselves to also be piloting, desktop as well as on-site verification to better understand their risks. So just really a snapshot of the whole range of things that we're doing. We're seeing some encouraging things. We're seeing some areas that perhaps needs improvement. So really glad to be part of this conversation and looking forward to the Q&A after. Thank you so much, Caroline and Faz.
Great. And thank you to you, Mabel. It's always great to work together and to see the multi-pronged approach. We need you to stop sharing your screen, Mabel.
Okay, let me do that.
Great. That Elevate takes that we can learn from. Well, we're moving now into talking to Outland Denim, and we all love Outland Denim. I only own one share in the world, and that's a share in Outland Denim. So I'm very proud of that share, and I know that they want us to be part of their story and part of their journey. So we're delighted to have Leisl. Leisl is the heart and the brains behind making this work. And so thank you, Leisl. And she'll be talking along with Richard, who is her colleague, who's helped them with their supply chain in Turkey. So that's what we're going to be hearing from them. So here we are. Here's Leisl and Richard.
Hi, I'm Leisl from Outland Denim. My role here is Social and Environmental Impact Manager. And I wanted to share with you today, along with Richard from Precision Solutions, about the Supply Network Intelligence System and why we developed it and how we've been running it thus far. So for Outland Denim, our vision has really been to create change in an industry that is really notorious for being so damaging to both people and environment. And so we're looking to create new pathways and new ways of running a fashion business that actually leave people and planet in a better place than how we found them. So we've been looking into our supply chain and diving deep. Our cut and sew facility, our first tier, has been set up to actually break the cycle of poverty and create training and employment opportunities for people that need it most. Many of our staff have come out of trafficking backgrounds. Others, it's more physical disability, but many needs for having safe and sustainable employment. So we've been developing a holistic business model that will bring in education and training, teaching the staff how to budget and save and plan for the future, as well as understanding what the signs of trafficking are and how to report and get support for situations like that when needed as well. So health education has been another huge topic we've been doing. And while we've been pouring in all this focus and energy into creating this holistic business model at our first tier, we've also been learning, especially over these last few years, how important it is to deep dive into all aspects of the supply chain. And so as we were looking into our supply chain and looking for what we would believe to be our area of highest risk, we felt it was the tier of our supply chain furthest from our reach as a brand, which is the organic organic cotton farms. For Outland Denim, we're using organic cotton in the denim that we're sourcing from Turkey and bringing it into our first tier in Cambodia. And as we learned a bit more about the organic cotton farms and the farm and agricultural sector of Turkey, we realised that there was many refugee community members that were working as seasonal migrant workers going from farm to farm. And this felt to us to be the most vulnerable demographic within our supply chain, and so the area we wanted to put our focus on. And so as a brand, we had the desire to do it, but we needed help with the expertise of how to look into situations of exploitation and be able to disrupt modern slavery networks when they're found as well. And today there's estimated to be 40 million people trapped in modern slavery. And so for Outland, we just believe it couldn't be clearer that traditional methods and auditing approaches, they have a place, but they're not sufficient, and they're not making the necessary changes in our industry to really see people freed from these issues. And so we'll be looking for above and beyond programs and projects that we can pilot and be involved in. So we met Richard from Precision Solutions, and Richard will share a bit more about the details of the supply network intelligence system in a moment. But we met Richard, and his background was in exactly what we were looking for, which was how to look for and uncover situations of modern slavery and how to get to the root cause of those issues. And so we shared what we knew of our supply chain, and he shared his expertise to develop a pilot that we launched in Turkey May this year. And so it's been a journey, and Richard will share more with you about that journey and how we've gone about it. But as a brand, we've been blown away actually to be directly hearing now from the migrant and seasonal community workers on the cotton farms in Turkey. It's incredible. We're hearing from them. We're hearing their experiences. We started off with communicating in local language through channels they trusted and in ways that they were already receiving and digesting information, communicating, building trust, and then also opening up lines to receive back communications from them during the pilot as well. So it's been incredible, and we see so much potential to continue this program and scale it. But I'll let Richard share a bit more about the details.
Thanks, Leisl. So I thought I might start by just providing a bit of an overview of our initial engagements with Outland Denim, talk a little bit about how we've designed the program and then the results of the pilot, and then next steps. So when we first connected with Outland Denim, we encountered a fantastic brand that wanted greater transparency of what was happening throughout their supply chain. So really they could maximise delivery on their brand promise regarding the assurance of ethical and sustainable labour practices. To achieve this, it became evident that Outland required a better understanding of what the key risks and issues were within their supply chain, as well as where they were occurring and why they were occurring. This information would allow them to generate buy-in to fixing these issues with their suppliers and also other brands, as well as informing the deployment of very scarce remediation resources to where they would have the greatest impact. And in addition, it was identified that they required an enduring monitoring and due diligence capability to ensure ongoing compliance and also inform regular reporting to their customers, employees and investors alike. So then focusing in on Turkey as their primary sourcing region, there are a number of challenges that we identified. Firstly, the scale and complexity of the supply chain there meant that a top-down approach was just too time and resource intensive using traditional methods, which would also only really provide a sort of a snapshot at a single point in time. Additionally, there were unknown elements of the supply chain. We didn't know where every farm was located. And this further limited the use of a top-down approach, as we obviously can't assess what we don't know exists. And finally, the temporary, seasonal and migratory cotton field workers that Leisl spoke about and that was identified as the most vulnerable in the supply chain were largely employed through informal and unregulated labour markets, which meant accessing them through supply channels would be very difficult. So to overcome these challenges, we designed the supply network intelligence system, locally referred to as SASELIN in Turkey, to provide two core functions. Firstly, it delivers a scalable education and awareness solution through strategic communications capabilities that are provided by our local partner, IM2. These capabilities allow us to simultaneously push messaging across large geographic areas and multiple tiers in the supply chain. Secondly, it delivers a non-judicial worker voice and grievance mechanism solution through a centralised communications node. Together, these outbound and inbound communications functions allow us to directly engage with vulnerable worker populations, suppliers, labour intermediaries and other stakeholders across regions rather than through supplier-defined channels. So it doesn't really matter then if the brand doesn't know who all their suppliers are or where they're all located, or if the workers are bouncing from farm to farm. Issues that are reported directly by victims into the communications node are validated and investigated on occurrence in collaboration with suppliers and local experts, rather than trying to assess entire supply chains, which provides a more effective and cost-efficient allocation of due diligence resources. So we started the program with a pilot, as Leisl indicated, and this pilot was designed to enhance our understanding of the cotton and textile supply chain. The pilot was run over a 3-month period, with the first 2 months focusing on educating workers around their rights and as an employee within Turkey, and then also increasing their awareness of the risks of exploitation, how to identify it, and what to do about it if they were victims themselves or believe someone else to be. During the final month of the pilot, we opened up inbound lines of reporting for workers to notify us of issues and raise concerns about specific grievances. In this 4-week period, we received over 150 calls and messages, with a number of issues being consistently raised, including the lack of clean water, the lack of protective equipment and wage discrepancies. Throughout the program, SAR-Salim education and awareness communications reached over 1.5 million people. This includes all members of the public, not just workers and not just the immediate geographic region that we're targeting, and had over 70,000 people actively engaged with the communications. A number of quick win remediation solutions were implemented during the pilot to address PPE shortages, and an ongoing investigation into wages was initiated with Outland Denim, Bossa and now Nudie Jeans are actively working on this investigation together. Following the success of the pilot, an enduring program has been established, and it's now opened up to other brands and suppliers to join. Nudie Jeans was the first brand to come on board with Outland Denim, and they've brought enormous expertise and influence to the initiative already. So the program is now expanding to include other tiers in the supply chain across broader geographic regions, and we're widening communications to target other worker groups, suppliers and labour intermediaries. This will support enduring education and awareness, capacity building, worker voice and grievance mechanism requirements. So I'm going to hand back over to Leisl now, who's going to talk a little bit about next steps from a brand perspective and where they see the program going.
Thank you, Rich. For Outland, we see so much potential to scale the program, not just further within Turkey, but also actually to other countries that we source from and have supply chain raw materials coming into our first tier from. So we just have to make some adjustments, but we could use a very similar model in other countries as well. So that's really exciting. We just are very passionate that we have to assume that there is going to be issues in the supply chain, and rather than hide from them and try to prove that they're not there, actually actively look for them and face them head on, and then collaborate with others that are sharing supply chain, because so many of us are sharing supply chain with other brands, even cross industry in the agricultural sector. But it just gives so much opportunity to then really start to make some systemic changes, work with suppliers, other brands, other stakeholders, NGOs, local experts, to start to put some steps in place to lift up the level of accountability and transparency and bring some solutions. So we see so much potential for this program as we continue to scale it and pioneer new ground with it. And we'd really love to invite other brands that are sourcing currently in the same region as us. If you are sourcing from Turkey, we'd love to collaborate. We think it will really expand the impact and the influence that the program can have, and also share the cost of running a program like this as well. So please reach out if you're interested, and we're more than happy to share more information and answer any question.
Well, this has been an incredible diversity of input today, from hearing from a person who's gone through it with Ruslan in Turkmenistan, to Allison's work and the fantastic work that the Cotton Campaign has been doing. We've been a part of the Cotton Campaign for so many years now, and Allison does some excellent work there. And then with Mabel, B2B, looking at what can be offered in the sense of social auditing and understanding, and the data that they get is just phenomenal. It's some of the best that we ever see. And then, of course, with our loved friends at Outland Denim, Leisl, and what Richard has been helping them to do, it really has been a kaleidoscope of understanding what's happening in this area. So let's go to the time we have left to a couple of questions to understand how we might dig down any deeper.
So Clive, hi Clive, has a question. Where's the primary export destination for Turkmen cotton? So Allison, I wonder if you know the answer to that. If you don't, we can find it out, but you might be able to help us with that. And Allison, I guess just to get a bit more even of a comment from you around the extent to which you feel that Turkmen and Uzbekistani cotton is still percolating into all of our supply chains.
Sure. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Great. And I just want to thank the other panelists for their presentations as well. I learned a lot, and it's been a great discussion so far. So Turkmenistan is notoriously opaque. There's not a lot of public data available, but in the supply chain research that we've managed to conduct so far, we know that a lot of Turkmen cotton in the form of raw cotton as well as cotton yarn is going to Turkey and also to China. We also have been tracking some shipments to Pakistan, to Singapore, to cotton traders. And we actually have been able recently to track some Turkmen cotton, getting directly into shipments that go to Europe and the US through those other channels. So we know that Turkmen cotton is getting in, but we think more supply chain research is necessary on the part of NGOs if we can do it, but also we would call on brands to really map the supply chains down to the raw material level. As hard as that is, it's really important. In terms of Uzbek cotton, Uzbekistan as of this year has stopped exporting raw cotton. As part of their reform process, they're trying to do all in-country value-added processing. Because the pledge is still in place and many companies have policies still not to source from Uzbekistan, less is getting out than it was before. Certainly through the years of the pledge, we know that some Uzbek cotton had gotten out, into spinneries in Bangladesh and elsewhere, and then on into products. But now that Uzbekistan is reforming and developing its own textile market, its own textile sector, we anticipate that Uzbekistan is looking to export actually textile products all the way to finished goods eventually. But hopefully, the reform process will really take hold and the pledge will go away and we'll be, in a position to really encourage companies to look at Uzbekistan for sourcing.
Mm. So, but at the moment, Allison, the pledge stays for Uzbekistan?
Yeah, the harvest, the 2020 harvest has just completed. So we're in the process of evaluating all of the research that has been done throughout the harvest. We know the preliminary results are that the government has really done much better this year. There was still forced mobilization of some public sector workers. Some of these private textile producers that are contracting for cotton production really aren't able to manage recruitment and still rely on officials who use coercion. But for the first time ever, our independent monitors, our partners in Uzbekistan, monitored some areas where they didn't find forced labor at all for the first time, in decades of this being a problem. So they really are overcoming this legacy of forced labor.
Yep.
Very helpful.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. Thank you. A question to Leisl, and maybe Richard wants to jump in as well. But Leisl, I loved your comment that, you know, we assume that there are problems there and we go looking for it and we look for solutions. One of our board members says, well, if you don't look for slavery, you won't find it. But if you do look for it, it's there. You will find it. You just have to go looking for it. But I guess many companies are reluctant to make any comment, to be transparent about that, to say, yeah, even you, your reputation is no slavery. How does taking that stance work for you in terms of your reputation?
That's a really good question. I think it is challenging because you dive in deep and you don't know exactly what you'll find or the right way to resolve it. But I've just been feeling that that's no excuse not to dive, because we don't know what we're facing until we really get in there. And so as a brand, we're making our decisions from the mindset of how do we ensure zero exploitation in the way we make this decision. And so as a brand, we have struggles in our supply chain and we have challenges. And I think we have to be so authentic and transparent and honest to be able to communicate that and to acknowledge it. Otherwise, we won't be able to address what the challenges are. And as we learn more about the fourth tier, we realize we need to work on the fourth tier. We need to work with the suppliers and the other stakeholders to increase those levels of accountability with various players and so on. So I know the founder, James, is also so passionate about, we want to communicate really authentically to build trust with our customers and say, we're not perfect, but we're really going to, be open to where we're at and where we want to get to and what we're going to do to try and get there. And we're going to make mistakes and wrong turns, but learn and just be really, willing to keep learning and learning from experts in the space, and adaptable, be willing to change and try new ways to find the right solutions.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I sometimes say in terms of modern slavery that if we all knew how to solve the problem, it would have been solved, because there's been a lot of smart people working on it. But we still have to keep being flexible, adapting, learning from each other, learning from experiences, and being prepared to be transparent and say, well, we had a problem and we had to find a solution to it. So thank you very much for that.
Allison, a question to you. What can consumers do in regard to trying to put pressure or making a difference in what's happening in Turkmenistan and Uzbekistan particularly?
That's a really good question, because Turkmen cotton is so opaque. No countries are really putting a label in their products saying made in Turkmenistan or made from Turkmen cotton. Although we have found towels being imported and flannel bed sheets being imported into the US that still say Turkmen cotton on them. So we're looking to stop those. So consumers should educate themselves and call on companies that they love to sign the pledge, and also to have visibility and traceability of their supply chains.
Mm-hmm. Wonder Richard, what further development's going to happen in your approach and in ways that you can help companies make a difference?
That's another really great question. And so I guess carrying on where the end of the presentation landed with Leisl, we're getting other brands on, which is a very important step, and having other brands join, like Nudie Jeans, that's come alongside Outland Denim with this program. We've seen a real step change in suppliers in Turkey and their willingness to engage. And so the next step is really expanding, one, geographically, looking at other areas in Turkey, but two, now that we've been really focusing on tier 4 and the farm level, moving back up the supply chain, looking at other tiers and expanding the program to engage more broadly with suppliers and labour intermediaries, and then partnering with other organisations to work on the capacity building aspects around this. Now that we've really taken that deep dive in and we've identified some key issues that we want to look at, it's now making sure that the suppliers and everyone in that supply chain has the tools and the experience and the capability to actually implement the types of processes that are needed to ensure ethical and sustainable labour practices.
Well, thank you so much for that, everybody. We've come to the end of our time, and thank you particularly to Ruslan and to Allison and to Mabel and to Leisl and to Richard. We really have had a feast of insight and information. Now, this is being recorded, and the recording will be available. Our wonderful Anna will send that out to you. There is also an evaluation form. This is the last webinar for the year, and you know, Mabel, you said we've done so many face-to-face ones, and my goodness, on the webinars that we've done this year, we've had over 2,500 registrations for our webinars. So it's reached out to a very wide group across many sectors, from consumers to industries, to sectors in industries, and to organisations, and to support companies like Richard and the wonderful service offerings of Elevate to do that. We just love working with Outland Denim, and Leisl, thank you for your work. Today was co-sponsored by Outland Denim as well, and so we love partnering with them, because we just think that it's companies like that that are shining the light and creating hope. So the recording will be available. You can share that. It will be downloadable. If you want to do that, it will be on the Vimeo channel, which has all the Vimeo facilities to be able to make those differences. So also the contacts for all the people speaking today are going to be up there. As Ruslan said, if there are particular questions to him, his email will be there, and we're going to have the chance to do that in some incredible ways. Thank you, everybody, for being a part of today. Thank you again to our speakers, and we hope you have a really good break over the Christmas New Year, wherever you are, and we hope that 2021 is going to be a much better year, and one where we also see that we can make big differences to make a real difference in the world in this way.